Paris is the most visited city on Earth. 100 million visitors per year come for the food, the light, the idea of what Paris means. Almost none of them understand that the city they are walking through was deliberately designed to prevent them from revolting. That sentence requires explanation. The wide boulevards, the clear sightlines, the systematic destruction of the medieval neighborhoods where barricades had been built and revolutions launched. The strategic placement of monuments at the centers of radiating street patterns that allow artillery deployment in 12 directions simultaneously. Paris is the most beautiful city in the Western world. It is also the most systematically engineered city for political control in the Western world. These two facts are not in conflict. They are the same fact. The beauty of Paris is not the product of aesthetic vision. It is the product of a political system that learned, through 5 revolutions in 2 centuries, that the most durable form of control is the kind that people pay to visit. Paris has undergone 5 structural revolutions in 1789, 1830, 1848, 1871, and 1968. 5 times, the population built barricades in the streets, removed a government by force, and demanded a fundamental reorganization of society. 5 times, the system that replaced the previous one asked the same question: how do we prevent this from happening again? 5 times, the population built barricades in the streets, removed a government by force, and demanded a fundamental reorganization of society. 5 times, the system that replaced the previous one asked the same question: how do we prevent this from happening again? And 5 times, the answer was the same. Not by eliminating the conditions that produced the revolution, by making the next revolution physically harder to execute, and by absorbing just enough of the demand to neutralize the immediate pressure. Paris is the clearest case in the modern world of a city where the urban form is, in large part, a counter-revolutionary technology. The streets are not beautiful despite their political function. They are beautiful because of it. A city that seduces you into compliance leaves no mark. A city that imprisons you leaves a wound. Paris found the third option: make the cage so elegant that the occupants compete for entry. But before the revolutions, there was the geography. And the geography explains why Paris became the place where Western civilization kept trying to reinvent itself. Paris exists because of an island. The Isle de la Cité, a small natural island in the Seine, provided the logic that drives every early settlement. Water on all sides, a single controlled crossing point, elevation above the floodplain. The Parisii, a Celtic tribe, were already living on the island when Julius Caesar's forces arrived in 52 BCE. The Romans saw what they always saw in such positions: a natural fortress at the center of a navigable river system, surrounded by the most productive agricultural land in northern Europe. They'd built a bridge. Around the bridge, a market. Around the market, a city. The Paris Basin is not merely fertile. It is the agricultural engine that fed northern Europe for 2 millennia. The rivers converging on it, the Seine, the Marne, the Oise, the Yonne, created a natural distribution system for grain, timber, and stone that made Paris the logical economic center of France before France existed as a political concept. Whoever controlled Paris controlled the logistics of the entire country. That logic created a city of extraordinary density, and extraordinary density in a pre-industrial city without sanitation or political representation for the majority of its population creates a specific kind of pressure, the kind that eventually explodes. But before the explosion, there was a century of building the conditions for it. By the 13th century, Paris was the largest city in Europe north of the Alps. 200,000 people in a space with no running water, no waste system, and streets too narrow for 2 carts to pass simultaneously. The University of Paris, founded around 1150, was already the intellectual center of Western Christianity. Thomas Aquinas taught here. Roger Bacon studied here. A student named Jean de Jandin, writing in 1323, described the smell of the Seine near the right bank tannery so precisely that his account could have been filed as a complaint in 1788. The wound, as he called it, was the same. Only the date changed. The medieval city had three incompatible power systems operating within it: royal authority on the Isle, ecclesiastical authority on the left bank, commercial authority on the right bank, each dependent on the others, each resenting the others. That structural tension would produce the first great rupture 4 centuries later, not through a philosophical movement, not through a political conspiracy, through a tax on bread. In a city where the working poor spent half their income on bread, during a year when the harvest had failed. Louis XIV moved the royal court to Versailles in 1682. He was 11 years old when the Fronde, a series of popular and aristocratic uprisings against royal authority, forced him to flee Paris in the middle of the night. He never forgot it. He never trusted the city again. Versailles was not built for luxury. It was built for distance. By relocating the court 12 miles from Paris, Louis XIV created a physical separation between royal power and the population, whose proximity had always made that power vulnerable. The aristocracy was required to live there, dependent on royal favor, removed from their local power bases. A nobleman named Saint Simon, who lived at Versailles for decades and recorded its workings with obsessive detail, described the daily ritual of the king's lever, the ceremony of the royal awakening, as a performance of absolute power that required 77 specific individuals to hand the king his shirt in a precise sequence. Each position in that sequence was fought over for years by the most powerful families in France. Louis had converted the most dangerous men in France into his dressers. It worked for a century, then the bread ran out, and the people who had no ritual to perform, no position to protect, no access to the system, they had nothing to lose. By the 1780s, Paris had approximately 600,000 people, the second largest city in Europe after London, with a social structure unchanged since the medieval period. The Third Estate, everyone who was neither noble nor clergy, paid the taxes that funded the state, the wars, and the court at Versailles. The nobility and clergy were largely exempt. France had spent itself into near bankruptcy funding the American Revolution. A woman named Marie Madeleine Jodin, a former actress who had studied with Diderot, noted in 1789 that the price of a 4-pound loaf of bread had reached 14 sous in a city where an unskilled laborer earned 20 sous per day. After bread, a working family had 6 sous left for everything else. The mathematics of survival had become impossible. The Enlightenment had spent a century developing the philosophical vocabulary for what was about to happen. Rousseau's contract, Voltaire's critique of arbitrary authority, the encyclopedia's implicit argument that reason, not birth, should determine standing. The ideas were ready. The hunger was real. The treasury was empty. What the pressure produced was not what anyone planned, including the people who made it. Between 1789 and 1851, Paris had 5 different governments in 62 years. Each transition involved street fighting. Each new government looked at the narrow medieval streets where barricades had been built and drew the same conclusion. In 1853, Napoleon III appointed Baron Georges-Eugène Haussmann as prefect of the Seine and gave him effectively unlimited authority to rebuild the city. What followed was the largest urban demolition and reconstruction project in Western history to that point. Haussmann demolished approximately 12,000 buildings. 60% of medieval Paris was erased. 340,000 people were displaced from the city center, mostly the working class, pushed to the peripheral arrondissements where rents were lower and surveillance was easier. He cut 137 kilometers of new boulevards through the demolished fabric. The widths were not aesthetic decisions. The Boulevard de Sebastopol was made 30 meters wide enough for artillery to be deployed and fired along its full length. The radiating pattern converging on the Arc de Triomphe, designed to allow cavalry charges from the center into any of 12 directions simultaneously. The systematic clearance of the working class from the city center removed the population most likely to build barricades from the locations where barricades had always been built. A mason named Victor Fournel documented the demolitions in 1865 as he watched his own neighborhood in the Marais being cleared. He wrote that the workers doing the demolition were the same men who had built the houses, that the city was eating itself with the hands of its own labor. He stood in the rubble of his street and counted the families he had known for 30 years, loading their belongings onto carts. None of them knew where they were going. The new addresses the prefecture had arranged were in districts they had never visited. The beauty of Paris is a panopticon. What you cannot hide in, you cannot revolt from. What you have been removed from, you cannot defend. The city of light was engineered to be a city of total visibility. In 1871, 18 months after Haussmann's demolitions were largely complete, the working class of Paris built barricades across the new boulevards and governed the city for 72 days. The Paris Commune was the first working class government in European history. It abolished the death penalty. It separated church and state. It gave workers control of enterprises abandoned by their owners. A schoolteacher named Louise Michel, who had been teaching in Montmartre for a decade, commanded a unit of communard fighters during the Semaine Sanglante. When captured, she demanded to be shot rather than imprisoned. The court sentenced her to deportation to New Caledonia instead. She spent 7 years there. When she returned to France in 1880 under amnesty, 10,000 people were waiting at the station. She lived until 1905. She never stopped. Haussmann's boulevards had not prevented the Commune, but they had changed its outcome. The wide streets made artillery deployment faster than in the medieval fabric. The systematic displacement of the working class population had reduced the density of revolutionary capacity in the city center. The visibility the boulevard design created worked against the communards as it had been designed to do. The Commune lasted 72 days. The Third Republic that crushed it lasted 69 years. Haussmann would have considered that a success. The Third Republic made a strategic decision about how to neutralize revolutionary pressure that was more sophisticated than anything Haussmann had designed. It gave the working class something to buy. Le Bon Marché, the first modern department store in the world, opened in 1852, expanded into the reorganized city. Consumer goods that had been luxury items became accessible to the lower middle class. The mass press created a shared popular culture. The World's Fairs of 1889 and 1900 converted Paris's identity from site of revolution to site of aspiration. The Eiffel Tower was built for the centenary of the revolution, the tallest structure on Earth, visible from every point in the city. The same visibility logic as Haussmann, but this time, what was being made visible was not military capacity. It was technological ambition. Give people something to be proud of, and they are less likely to burn it down. The Belle Epoque lasted from approximately 1880 to 1914. Then the war came, and everything the Belle Epoque had built was tested against something it was not designed to survive. After the liberation in 1944, Paris reorganized itself around a new political consensus: the welfare state, the dirigist economy, the grands projets that would project French technological and cultural ambition onto the urban landscape. The grands ensembles, massive social housing towers built in the peripheral banlieues during the 1950s and 60s, were the post-war version of Haussmann's logic. Move the working class away from the center. Provide them with modern housing. Neutralize the urban density that produces revolutionary pressure. They also reproduced Haussmann's failure. The banlieues became the site of France's most persistent social crisis. Concentrated poverty, youth unemployment, racial discrimination, and physical isolation from the economic center of Paris created exactly the conditions the housing had been designed to relieve. An Algerian French worker named Ali Mejdoub moved into a new grand ensemble in Sarcelles in 1961. Displaced from central Paris by a redevelopment project 2 years earlier, he raised 4 children in the apartment. His grandson was arrested during the banlieue riots of 2005. The same displacement logic, 2 generations later. In May 1968, 10 million workers went on strike across France simultaneously. Students occupied the Sorbonne. De Gaulle, briefly considering abandoning power, flew secretly to a French military base in Germany to confirm the army would support him before returning. The government survived. It made enough concessions to dissolve the immediate pressure. The pattern held again. In 2018, a protest movement against a fuel tax became the most sustained popular uprising in France since 1968. The Gilets jaunes, yellow vests, were not a party or a union. They were people who felt that French economic policy systematically benefited Paris at the expense of everyone who could not survive without a car. They came to Paris. They demonstrated on the Champs-Élysées. They vandalized the Arc de Triomphe. 11,000 people were arrested. The government made partial concessions. The movement dissipated. How many times has this exact sequence occurred in this city? The pressure builds. The population takes to the streets. The state responds with force. The government makes enough concessions to reduce the immediate pressure. The city returns to its condition of controlled beauty. The underlying conditions remain. When we look at Paris today, we see a city that has perfected the mechanism its history required it to develop. The spatial organization makes large-scale insurrection difficult. The welfare state absorbs enough social pressure to prevent the rupture point from being reached. The cultural identity of Paris, the food, the fashion, the art, the cafes converts the city's political function into an aesthetic experience that attracts 100 million visitors annually. The most precise achievement of the Parisian political system is this: it turned the cage into the brand. The city redesigned to suppress insurrection is now marketed globally as the symbol of human freedom. No other urban system in history has managed that particular inversion with such consistency, across such a long period, at such scale. Paris has had 5 revolutions. Every one of them failed to fundamentally alter the distribution of power in French society. Every one of them did alter the physical form of the city. That is not coincidence. It is the mechanism. The city absorbs the revolutionary demand by converting it into urban renovation. The renovation improves the aesthetic quality of the city while making the next revolution more difficult. The improved aesthetics attract investment, tourism, and aspiration, which fund the state that manages the city. The cycle is self-reinforcing. And it is, by historical measure, extraordinarily effective. No other city of comparable political volatility has maintained its position as the global standard of urban desirability for as long as Paris has. Louise Michel, the schoolteacher who commanded communard fighters and was deported to the Pacific for it, said something in her memoirs that no urban planner ever cited, but that describes Paris more precisely than most political science. The bourgeoisie is afraid. It has reason to be. We are everywhere. She was writing in 1886. The fear she described has not disappeared. It has been architecturally managed. The question Paris forces on the 21st century is not whether the system works. It demonstrably works. The question is what working means. The pressure that generated the revolution of 1789 was inequality, exclusion, and a political system that treated the majority of the population as an expense rather than a constituency. 235 years later, France has the 4th largest economy in the world, universal health care, and 6 weeks of mandatory paid vacation. It also has banlieues where youth unemployment exceeds 40% and where a broken taillight during a traffic stop can end in a death that triggers a week of nationwide riots. The revolution keeps trying to finish. Paris keeps making it beautiful instead.